Good evening. You're listening to Adrenaline Radio. This is 1680 AM on your dial. I'm Fred Blanchard, host of Adrenaline Motorsports. The other thing that I alluded to in the earlier part of the show was about a group of guys back east that run blown alcohol dragsters, and I thought that was way cool because these guys really don't have to race, but they build these cars, and they run about 4 times a year from what I understand, and they go out and promote themselves to the local strip owners, and one of the guys happens to be a listener to this show, and as I mentioned his name earlier, Frank Shea, and I was pretty pleased to hear that, and in fact I had the opportunity to talk to him a little bit, as I mentioned earlier part of the show, and he's a pretty cool guy, and he gets out there and makes it happen because this is what he wants to do. I mean, he wants to race, and that's to me what it was all about at the very beginning of drag racing, and I know because I was there back in the late 50s and early 60s, and I had that same desire and feeling, and that's kind of what I did. And I thought that at the time nobody had that burning desire as we did, but I found that all over the country there were guys just like myself and my late partners and who wanted to do the same thing, and we were blessed in having some pretty neat places to go race at. Basically, one example is the legendary Lions drag strip, which brings back a ton of memories. I mean, we were there when they first started using the push down, the push starts from the down the middle of the strip. 2 cars would pull out and start pushing down, and they'd light the engines, and as they approached the starting line, they would get behind each other and pull up to the line and get ready to make that run. And it was in those days, it was the starting with a flag. They didn't have the lights in those days, and they didn't have the kind of strips that we raced on in those days either. What they had was just a few lights to show you the way to go, and when you got down there through the lights, to find a return road was a chore in itself at speed. And one of the things that it normally is not said by a lot of the guys who've been down the course in a car that has loaded with nitro is that there's an awful lot of vibration, and the motors are up in front, and those little lights that you're supposed to drive the car through aren't little lights anymore. They're vertical lines is what they are, as you vibrate through all this and hope that your motor will hang together until you get through that. And but I wouldn't change it for a minute. It was an experience you can never forget, and I certainly haven't, and it was a joy to me when I had that opportunity. But we moved on and learned to see what the big kids were doing. We never did make it to the big show back in those days. We didn't have the budget as some of these guys have acquired today. But this is why when I hear about people like Frank Shea and the guys that are out there racing, it means a lot to me because they're the ones that are out there today, and they actually have enough cars to have an 8-car show, qualify for 8 cars, and so they've really done a big deal back there in the East Coast, and I got to give them a lot of credit. And with that, I think I'll get off that subject and wanted to talk a little bit about my visit again to the Carroll Shelby Engineering Facility. It's kind of a best kept secret, but there's a lot of people there that utilize their services. We've had the likes of Carol Carter from Manassas, Virginia, back in the early days, who is pretty much now the master of the big Ford engines, basically the Hemi Fords to be exact. And that was another engineering project that came out of various industries, and he's now the proud owner of it. And he does his machine work, some with Shelby people and some with the Root Company. And but he's producing blocks and heads, and but he builds the big monster engines that go in drag boats, and he also builds a lot of the Pro Outlaw engines that run. You can do your racing out there, and whereas it's kind of diminished out here on the West Coast. We used to have a lot of drag strips out here, but it's gotten down now where we've got just a couple, and of course the icon that kind of helped us start it all was the one there at Formoso outside of Bakersfield. And that was an event that was held back in the 50s, pretty much promoted by the sponsors, the Smokers Car Club. They were the sponsors of the events going on there at Formoso, and it coined the name the March Meet. And in the early days, you ran everything. I mean, you had not only dragsters, you had coupes and sedans with big supercharged engines, and I was kind of in awe of all the things that I saw up there. In fact, the Paisano brothers had their Model A, their 29 Model A with a big blown engine in it, and they competed in those gas classes back in the early days. They also had a green Plymouth with a blown Cadillac in it, and they used to like to race Gene Adams with his Sedanette that he had with his Oldsmobile, and that was really a big deal. I mean, those were the days of the beginning of the Gasser Wars. In fact, that was just before the Gasser Wars. And then later came the likes of the Stone Woods and Cook and Junior Thompson and Mazmanian and C&O Hydro. Those were the guys that came afterwards. But that's how it all began, guys. It really was a neat deal. And these guys were racers. And when I talk about that, the shows that they put on in those days, they weren't what you see today. You qualify for 16 locations. I mean, at Bakersfield, you run what you brung, and you'd race and qualify for 2 days and race for a whole day, and you'd have 64 cars, and then the winner of that event race it would sit out, and then you'd run all the cars again, and the winner of that event would race the winner of the previous day, and that's how you won your money. So it was a whole bunch of people going on with, racing that type of racing back in the early days. I know that when I finally thought I was going to get there to the big show, so to speak, as they call it today, I suppose, we ran AHRA, American Hot Rod Association, which was an organization that was out here on the West Coast for some time, running the different strips like Lyons and also Fontana and places like that. We were very fortunate to win the AHRA Hot Rod Nationals there at Irwindale Raceway in 1966. It was a 64-car show then, but we were young guys out of Compton, California, which has changed considerably, but that's kind of the neighborhood we hung out at, and that's kind of the fact of the painter at that time who painted the car that we ran was the Cerny family, and George Cerny was the premier painter of the era. He painted a lot of fancy cars, and one of the paint jobs you'll see in some of these cars was on the Allison Lee car that was just recently restored by Dida. And Bruce Dida was copied everything, even to the finding of the lace curtain where he sprayed paint through, which would leave the image of the lace on the body of the car. And he did the whole redo of the car. In fact, they had Nostalgia Race in Virginia where the car was displayed on television for the first time. I found that way cool. I thought that was a neat deal. And but they talked it up with the work that Bruce did. But Bruce here is out on the West Coast also. He's in the city of Carson, and he right next to Don Long of Don Long Race Car Chassis. So they kind of are neighbors with each other. But Bruce does a lot of the sheet metal work and a lot of the frame work. But Don Long he builds the hardcore cars, of course, all the fancy cars, of course. But that's he's quite an engineer in his own right. But that's a chassis builder in the area, too, not too far from us. But that's pretty much what you find in Southern California. You find these guys all over, but that's kind of the direction that the area is turned to, is that a lot of the racing is now on the East Coast and throughout the southern states as well, Texas as well. And, of course, there's boat racers now, which wasn't as prevalent as they are today.